Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome back to another exciting episode of You're More Than Your MS. Last week I reviewed some of the Marvel TV series for you guys. This week I'm going to finish up the list of Marvel TV series. They all are worth binge watching through Netflix. Hope you get hours of exciting action TV watching like I did. The first I'm going to review today is Marvel's Iron Fist. Danny Rand returns to New York City after being presumed dead for 15 years to reclaim his family's company from Harold Meacham and his children, Ward Meacham and Joy Meacham. When a threat emerges, Rand must choose between his family's legacy and his duties as the Iron Fist. For as popular as the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, there's been a growing contention of both moviegoers and critics who have called the franchise out for its formulaic storytelling and overall uniformity. While a certain consistency is expected among the various installments of a multi-billion-dollar film series, the 14 MCU releases to date have in most instances fallen prey to the same shortcomings. With few exceptions, nearly all of the films hew particularly close to the Iron Man formula that kicked off the whole enterprise in the first place. With Iron Fist, a similar pattern is beginning to form in the interconnecting Netflix series firmly set within the MCU. Finn Jones, aka Loras Tyrell, on HBO's Game of Thrones, plays Danny Rand, the presumed dead son of billionaire parents who returned to his hometown to reclaim his family's company. But the Danny that comes back to New York isn't the one that left 15 years ago. In the intertwining years, he's been trained in martial arts and imbued with the mystical power of the Iron Fist. Before long, Danny finds himself caught up in century-old feud, threatening his city and the people he cares about, as he struggles to pick up the pieces of his old life. The controversy surrounding Jones's casting aside, in which some felt that the roles was a missed opportunity to cast an Asian American, Jones neatly balanced the naivety and the wisdom that makes Danny Rand a very different hero than we've seen on the other Marvel Netflix series. Whereas Matt Murdock, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage are burdened by complicated past and cynical lives, Danny spent his entire adolescence in a monastery, and as such, often displays the innocence, emotional unexpectability, and hopefulness not often seen in this genre. He's also something of a blank slate, especially early on, which makes him a bit less engaging than his predecessors. The fact that his backstory plays like a lesser-known variation on the tragic billionaire childhood of Oliver Queen and Bruce Wayne doesn't do much to set him apart in any kind of impactful way. Rather, the weight of Iron Fist falls to his stellar supporting cast, Jessica Henswick, another Game of Thrones alumni. In particular, stands out as Colleen Wigg, a non-nonsensical ally of Danny's, who at first hesitates to join his crusade. David Wyndham chews scenery every second he's on scene as the moral, ambiguous corporate tycoon Harold Meacham, and Jessica Stout expertly toe the line as his daughter Joy. Perhaps the character most likely to incite a love-hate response from viewers. Naturally, a few faces of Marvel Netflix series past reappear here as well, considering that Iron Fist is the final solo series to debut prior to the miniseries event, The Defenders. Indeed, there is plenty of connective tissue introduced in Iron Fist that functions as a kind of bridge between the more grounded world of Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and the mysticism that lies beneath the surface in Daredevil. The show created by TV writer Scott Buck feels very much like it belongs in the cityscape as those earlier series. But perhaps that's part of the problem. Much like the MCU films, the Netflix series have such an even tenor across the board that there's not a whole lot that feels fresh with Iron Fist. While Daredevil is the vigilante, Jessica Jones is the noir-style detective, and Luke Cage is the neighborhood champion. Iron Fist remains the least defined and therefore blandest addition to the team so far. In all fairness, any interconnections universe is bound to reach the point wherein it teeters on the verge of stretching itself too thin, of cannibalizing itself by merely repackaging the same story elements and character types into something new. There's still quite a bit of joy in Iron Fist, and it's clear that Buck and his creative team are aiming to create a series that harkens back to the classic 1970s kung fu properties that inspired the comic book series in the first place. However, just when you think the story is going in an intriguing new direction, it tends to shift into something overly familiar, almost as if the MCU overlords are making too concerted an effort to prove to viewers just how closely knit the Defenders truly are. We'll give the show the benefit of the doubt there, but regardless, this is easily the least compelling Marvel Netflix series so far. By the time the credits run on the final episode in Iron Fist, all but the most devoted fans will be relieved that the road to the Defenders will have finally come to an end. Maybe the combination of Iron Fist and Luke Cage in a rumored Hero for Hire series can punch up the former character's appeal before the possibility of Season 2 is floated. The next series, as I mentioned in the earlier review, is Marvel's The Defenders. Marvel's The Defenders follows Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, a quartet of singular heroes with one common goal: to save New York City. This is the story of four solitary figures burdened with their own personal challenges, who realize they just might be stronger than teamed up together. When teamed up together, Marvel's pocket universe of superpowered pulp heroes on Netflix has been trending less marvelous since the first season of Daredevil and Jessica Jones. Luke Cage had muscular performances led by the commanding Mike Coulter, but a thin plot, while Iron Fist, led by the miscast Finn Jones, has plain and wimpy. But The Defenders, a team-up saga that resembles the leads and supporting cast of all four shows and resolves some ongoing intrigues, is a lively genre entertainment that recharges your interest in Marvel pop. It represents a big event, yet values consolidations. Marvel should embrace this approach moving forward. Until now, Netflix's Marvel series have been 13 episodes long. The producer of those shows, even the better ones, have never been able to generate enough plot to fill the time, resulting in thinly stretched, poorly paced volumes of story. They just don't know how to vamp in compelling fashion. So, while capable of fielding singular episodes of great power, the drill down on a character or relationship or some bit of mythical business, they don't do it enough, and they rarely do it well, either because the characters aren't deep enough or the writers lack significant imaginations for them. Each starry show has had a slick, handsome veneer, yet most episodes look underproduced or underfunded, a property that makes for dullness. Long, chatty scenes on just a few sets, and New York locations interrupted by an occasional elaborate fight sequence that usually spectacular. It's like getting promised a generous baker's dozen and getting a bag of donuts holes instead. The Defenders is 8 episodes long, and damn if it doesn't make the case that less is more. Of course, it has to have 4 leads and all of their respective dramas and supporting players to service. Each character gets a concise, emotional, resilient individual arc packed with substantial scenes. The first 2 episodes nimbly move between them, resetting and advancing them while also using them to nurture an intriguing mystery-driven story that brings them together for a solid group, fighting in episode 3 and some extended banter and bonding in episode 4. The images are sharper and more inspired. The dialogue is wittier, and the pace is brazier than the usual Marvel Netflix escapade. Kudos to the showrunner, Marco Ramez, half of the team behind the disappointing second season of Daredevil, for upping his own game, honoring the best part of every series, and alleviating the franchise. Matt Murdock, the blind, big-hearted attorney whose other senses are massively amplified, is struggling with his choice to give up moonlighting as Daredevil while estranged from friends Foggy and Karen. Jessica Jones, super strong, super cynical private investigator, is still recovering from a triggering clash with psychic rapist Kilgrave and struggling with the whole superhero thing. Cox and Ritter, rocking their roles as anti-hero protectors of Hell's Kitchen, are terrific, and given the show's emotional heft, they sell a standout sequence in the early going, in which they meet, verbally clash, then takes turns stalking and eluding each other in broad daylight. As Luke Cage, Coulter anchors everything with effortless charisma, grit, and wit. His Power Man is newly sprung from prison and reestablishing himself as an activist defender of Harlem and reconnecting with girlfriend Claire Temple, night nurse to costume vigilante, and Danny Rand, aka Iron Fist, billionaire hippie and magical white savior of the mystical Easter Kingdom of Kung Lao, is tolerable. His character is central to the story. Marvel is going to make a love this guy, damn it, and almost everything about him remains laughably dumb. From his mythology to the concept and special efforts of his Iron Fist. But Finn's works hard. So hard it's actually endearing. His mediocrity is blunted by his co-stars, including Jessica Henswick, improved and owning her role as Colleen Wing. The other characters are made to cast shade on Iron Fist with put downs and eye rolls. It's mean and it's cheap, and it's a degrading use of culture in particular. And all it does is prove that Iron Fist is a weak link in the would-be fantastic foursome. Great villains play by great actors have marked the best seasons of the Netflix series shows. The Defenders is blessed by a dynamic actress and geek pop royalty. Sigourney Weaver plays Alexandria, death-defying leader of the occult underworld organization known as the Hand. She makes a generic part pop with nuance, menacing, and elevates everyone involved, notably the assassin Elektra. The Defender is far from perfect, but it is enjoyable superhero adventure disguised by improvements and innovations that I hope Marvel will carry forward. Shorter scenes, more team-ups, fewer shows. Start the consolidation by letting go of Iron Fist if Danny Rand must persist, and add him to the other shows and let the stronger players carry him. That's what Super Friends are for. The next series I'm going to review is Marvel's The Punisher. Frank Castle is haunted and hunted after the murder of his family and becomes a vigilante known as the criminal underworld as the Punisher, who aims to fight crime by any means necessary. The Marvel Netflix shows at the most successful follow a cookie-cutter format. An individual, a representative of the marginalized group, is both burdened and blessed with extraordinary abilities. The 13-episode season becomes a obligation of for the superhero, flashbacks, context, and of course the inescapable threads tying Max Murdock and a blind man, Jessica Jones, a rape survivor, Luke Cage, a black man. The times where this subgenre of Marvel shows have flattered is straying from the format, whether the season 2 of Daredevil, the ill-conceived Iron Man, or the ensemble series The Defenders. At first, Marvel's The Punisher seems like another misstep. In the television landscape at large, another overwhelmingly gray and brutally violent show centered on a dysfunctional anti-hero is superfluous within the superhero genre. It's even more so, but The Punisher transcends that it appears to be, not completely and not always. This is still a very violent show, saturated in tortured masculinity, but thanks to John Berthel's seamless performance as the non-superpowered vigilante Frank Castle, and the showrunner Steve Lightfoot's sharp, conscious storytelling, The Punisher approaches the high points of Marvel's Jessica Jones by introducing a damaged, deadly character and telling his story as one piece of an unjust whole. Despite first impressions, Frank Castle is in fact a marginalized figure. It's difficult to imagine better casting than Bernthal, who communicates so fluently with impassive silences and is convincing both when he is being terribly violent and especially gentle. But it still takes the show a few minutes of throat clearing to find its sweet spot. In the first episode, The Punisher might as well be ticking off a checklist of anti-hero tropes. He handles his emotions by slamming a sledgehammer into a wall over and over again for hours. He is so frequently haunted by memories of his wife and children that they become irritatingly present, if only because his wife especially has no discernible character traits other beyond being warm, soft, and probably clean. He broods constantly with nearly optimistic range over the page of a book, behind a steering wheel, on the Staten Island ferry. Frank Castle broods so much, so single-mindedly, you want to offer him some eggs to help out with. But outside of Frank, the show starts offering the audience storylines that don't feel of a piece with the vigilante's narrative. There's Denai Madini, a suit at Homeland Security, who is hyper-conscious of the fact that as a Persian American woman, she's both an asset and a liability. There's a veteran support group led by Frank's friend Curtis, in which veterans from very different backgrounds struggle to make sense of the world they are reintegrating into. And there's a cocky hawker Micro who starts hunting Frank after spotting him on one of the many surveillance cameras posted around the city. Without fully realizing it, Frank's unit mates, Micro, Denai, and Frank himself, are all trying to understand what happened during one tour of duty, a series of missions where it is revealed Frank's unit was pushed to commit war crimes as other veterans become better, bigger characters, and Denai makes more connections in Homeland Security. The network of guilt and corruption behind the senseless violence is slowly brought to light. Both Denai and Micro are intriguing characters, Denai in premise and Micro in execution. Denai was created for the TV show, and Micro is based on the comics. But as far as supporting characters in Marvel shows go, both exceed expectations. Moss Bertrand, in particular, who girls' viewers will remember as Murney's tiresome husband, Desi, brings astonishing life to a character who is otherwise so classically a comic book villain. Like Frank, Micro faked his death. Unlike Frank, though, his family is still alive. Micro watches them obsessively through cameras and microphones he's placed all through the house. Frank figures this out and starts to use Micro's presidential watching to manipulate him. He shows up at the Lieberman's house one day, seemingly by accident, and insinuates himself into the Micro's former life. But Frank's is missing a wife and kid, just as Micro's wife and kids are missing a husband and father. Does not go unnoticed. One of the strangely compelling things about The Punisher is how deeply messed up it is, as if it is observing, in the tradition from comic book page to live action, how twisted some of these characters' dynamics are. This carries through in the show's relationship to its violence. Every episode is punctuated with a set piece of stunning violence, not just visually striking as it often the case with action sequence, but visually affecting too. Action scenes that we have all grown accustomed to, like a car accident where a sedan flips into the air and then lands heavily, or weapons drawn menacingly at a high-stakes card game, take on new brutality in The Punisher, which pays uncomfortably close attention to the sound of bone snapping, the smears of blood on Sledgehammer, the intimacy of getting close enough to someone to kill them. This is a brand of violence that is especially well punishing, brutal, scrappy, painful set pieces that often nothing ballistic or glorious about the act of beating the crap out of someone. It's cynical and at times pretty despairing too. But above all that, the Punisher is cynical about is the use of force. This is a series where a man who was asked to senselessly kill by his government goes rogue and ends up hunting down members of that same government because they made him kill people. The show is weary of guns, weary of blind patriotism, weary of unquestionable service. It sides only and always with veterans. The affection that military veterans have for the character of the Punisher is a long documented one. The character was originally a veteran of the Vietnam War when introduced in 1974. In the Netflix series, he's a veteran of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Bernthal's Frank Castle seems to have wrapped himself in these forces because he doesn't trust anyone else to have the power of wielding them. And at the same time, because he is so broken by his own tragedy, he is a protagonist who commits violence while understanding how that violence creates trauma. It makes for a charged, destabilizing dynamic, and one that Bernthal inhabits with skillful. It comes through in the way a few of these scenes are directed to. In one episode, a dark room is literally lit up with gunfire. In a mid-season episode, an entire action sequence is portrayed as if it is a first-person shooter video game. An unnervingly brilliant construction for anyone familiar with that medium is implicated the audience almost again our will, putting us in the position of the soldier in the field from the comfort of our Netflix watching couch. The thread of Micro watching the other characters draws the viewers into the story too. We are watching for clues just as he is with the infamous on surveillance, domestic terrorism, and homeland security. The Punisher is strikingly relevant and quite possibly the most relevant Marvel show, at least from a national security standpoint. In all, The Punisher is not just satisfying, but surprising and interpretation of Netflix and Marvel's tried and true partnership that offers more depth and challenges to the audience than even the gritty world of Jessica Jones. Free from superpowers and superheroes, the Marvel Universe is more forgiving and more interesting. Of course, the slightly cartoony Marvel Cinematic Universe is still a world where people named Carson Wolf show up and act as if they are not obvious villain. But the Punisher's place in it is a welcome morass of thorny questions and unresolved answers. At least in this part of the television landscape, there is room for another anti-hero. Well, my friends, that brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed everything and will get a chance to check out the things I reviewed for you, and I hope you will return for even more reviews next week. I would like to thank MS&Me Radio and my listeners for giving me the opportunity to share my passions with you. Good night, and always remember, you're more than your MS.